morning. My name is Richard Wexler, and this is Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. Special episode this morning. We have two young ladies as our guests. They're both the co-owner of Legacy Navigation. I am going to introduce them. First, Brooke Baker. She's an RN. She graduated from Boise State University in 2004 as a registered nurse with a degree in health science. With over 20 years of experience in community-based care, Brooke takes a straightforward approach based on clinical diagnosis, proven outcomes, and dispelling common myths in the healthcare and Medicaid world. Secondly, and the other co-owner, Jessica Young, MSW, she fell in love with senior case management when she started working in hospice at 18 years old. She earned her bachelor's degree in social sciences, also from Boise State University, and a master's degree in social work with an emphasis in geriatrics and community mental health from Northwest Nazarene University. Ladies, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Richard.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Well, I want to thank you both for being here this morning on this bright, sunny morning. And we're going to talk about maybe a subject that a lot of people don't really understand that well, which is Medicaid. I think people big word, may understand Medicare, but I'm not sure if they really understand Medicaid. Can I ask you guys, and one of you can take this, just kind of a general definition of what Medicaid is?
Sure. This is Jessica. So, the Medicaid that we're speaking about today is specifically the aged and disabled waiver through Medicaid. And the difference between Medicare and Medicaid is Medicare is a federal benefit, and this Medicaid is state run. And so each state has different rules and regulations, but essentially, this aged and disabled waiver will cover long term care for seniors.
Okay, interesting. So, one thing, and I know a lot of people in your industry and also in long-term care say that about 70% of seniors can't afford that long-term care. In the almost 20 years I've been doing this and standing in front of thousands of people, I'm going to take that number up in what I've seen that it's probably over 90%, and it may be even greater than that, of people that just can't afford care. I mean, you guys may agree with that, disagree. Any comments?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Brooke. I would agree with that. Statistically speaking, they put the numbers at 70%, but I would agree that about 90% of people need this waiver. Nobody on Social Security alone can afford a higher level of care, whether that's paying for private caregivers in the home that runs about $35 to $45 an hour, or an assisted living that's anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 a month, or even a skilled level of care which runs anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 a month. So nobody on Social Security alone can afford those costs. And even if you've prepared financially for your retirement, when we were saving money, when we were younger, that was a lot of money then. But now, with the cost of inflation and everything else, our retirement funds don't just last us as long as they need us to.
And I totally agree with you. And let's take a breath for a second and kind of back up. So you're talking, let's say, on average, close to $40 an hour for someone to come in the home. I mean, folks, you've heard me talk about that. Think about that. That's a lot. And then, as we've talked about, what's going to happen if mom maybe still lives in the house you guys grew up in, but the kids have moved all over the country or possibly even out of the country, and she needs someone to come in the home, and you're looking at those kind of dollars. Or maybe there's talk about moving her to a community and assisted living, which can be beautiful. But as was just talked about, 5, 6, 7,000 in some of the bigger cities, even more than that. And that's per month. I mean, that folks, I talked about financial planners, and I talked to them about really trying to help people understand from a young age this is something we all need to be planning for, and that little tiny word called care. So let's make up a couple. Let's say they're late 70s, pushing 80 years of age. So they're obviously married. What if the spouse needs the care and the other one doesn't?
Sure. Well, what's nice about this aged and disabled waiver is that the state allows for what's called a separation of assets. And through this separation of assets, we're able to preserve the majority of income and their joint assets into the quote unquote well spouse or the non applicant, in order to get the other spouse who does need the care qualified for the waiver. So this process is quite complicated and takes a lot of time. There are a lot of rules and codes that Medicaid throws out that you have to follow, and it's a timeline of events, but definitely doable. And that's what we specialize in specifically, is helping with the separation of assets and getting that completed, as well as finding the care once we get their loved one on the service.
So, as you just talked about, it's complicated. I mean, it's complicated applying for Medicare. I can see where it's even more complicated here. You guys are both certified, excuse me, Medicaid planners. Talk about that. What is that? And how can you help someone?
Yeah. So, as certified Medicaid planners, it's pretty rare in the Western states, pretty more prevalent in the Eastern states. But both Jessica and I took a year-long training where we studied all the rules in every state about Medicaid and the ways to adjust assets and range income and those kinds of things. And then we took a certified board exam. So we both passed with our certified Medicaid planners certificate, which means that we are just experts in the field.
Wow. Now, do you normally meet with people in person, over the phone, via Zoom? What do you guys do?
Yeah, actually, all of the above. Here locally in Idaho, we meet with our clients face to face. We recognize that most of our seniors are having trouble getting out of the home anyways. We try to make it as easy as possible. If they're not local, via Zoom or email, phone is just as well. But yeah, typically we meet up and we do a full financial, physical, and psychosocial assessment of their situation. So
Wow.
we're able at that point to sort of identify, what this looks like for them going forward, what their goals are, and how we can help them reach those.
I've never heard this term. What is psychosocial?
Basically, it's just all of the social needs that they have. Are they experiencing depression? Are they needing referrals for additional senior resources like counseling, or maybe there's home health available? Different things that they might need.
Interesting. So let's say someone starts going through the application process and they find out that they're denied getting Medicaid and they're told, look, I make too much money. Can you guys talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different ways depending on the state you're living in. Medicaid has an income test and an asset test. So in most states, their assets, they say, need to be below $2,000. So the recipient that's getting Medicaid has to have less than $2,000 in cash assets, which includes life insurance, cash value, any balance in their checking account, anything that can be liquidated immediately. And then on top of that, they have an income limit. So if they say for instance, in Idaho, they say that your income has to be below $2,843 a month.
Wow.
If you go over that, they allow what's called a Miller Trust, and it's a separate checking account set up in a trust that, should you pass, if there's any money left in there, Medicaid can take those assets as a repayment to their program.
So explain
So it's
that.
certified. Oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
explain that a little bit more. So, the
Right,
Miller Trust and exactly how that works and what you were just talking about.
right. So a Miller Trust is essentially set up as a checking account, and the beneficiary is Medicaid. And they say you can put any amount over your income in there. You can put your whole income in there if you want. And any amount left in that Miller Trust after you pass is essentially Medicaid's property for whatever money they've paid out. Now, you can use it as a checking account to still pay for your cares and your basic needs and your medications and whatever that looks like. They just don't allow you to take trips or go gambling or anything like that with it.
Interesting. So, is that something you guys see a lot? Is it very common?
Very common, especially when we're looking at people who have maybe a retirement in addition to their Social Security. So, very common. We do help establish those Miller Trusts, and we work with specific banks who have been really good at setting up and managing those trusts.
Because my guess is the average individual out there would have no idea what this Miller Trust is that you're talking about. But then let's look at a scenario. Now I have a single lady she's a widow in her late 70s, in between Social Security and other monies that she has. Maybe she has 20 or $30,000. You and I know that really isn't enough to pay for care on a long-term basis. Is that kind of who you guys are talking about?
No, so the Miller Trust only solves the over the income limits.
Got
So
it.
if they have more assets than $2,000, they only have, it only solves the over the income limit. Now, not all states offer Miller Trusts, and in those states, they call it the medically needy. So if your cost of care exceeds your income, then you qualify for this benefit.
Very interesting. So you guys have also talked about this $2,000 asset allowance, spending down, so on and so forth. Can you guys talk about that a little more?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that one. Um, what's great about the asset limit is that they are flexible for married couples, like we discussed. We can do the separation of assets, and essentially, let's say, for example, they had $100,000 in joint assets. The state would say they need to split that in half, and the applicant needs to spend their half down below $2,000. And the way that, as certified Medicaid planners, we help guide them with that is usually, purchasing a single premium immediate annuity or a Medicaid compliant annuity, which would pay their spouse a monthly income. So therefore, it takes it out of their name as an asset and turns it into an income for the spouse, which is not counted towards the Medicaid eligibility. And for a single person, it looks different. There isn't someone to, transfer the assets to spouse wise, but you still could do gifting. Um, if you do gift any funds out of your name within a 5-year look back period, you'll be subject to a penalty. And that penalty is like in hockey, getting put in the penalty box for a certain period of time where you're ineligible for Medicaid.
Wow.
And so what that looks like is for about every state's different, but approximately every $10,000 that you gift, you're penalized for 1 month of care, essentially, from Medicaid. So as long as your care costs are less than $10,000, it would make sense to gift to your family and then just pay privately for those months.
Wow, I'm sitting here listening, and I'm kind of going back to what you guys said before, Jessica. I mean, this is complex. I mean, I,
It really
I
is.
really
Mhm.
don't think the average person would have any clue what you guys are talking about. So let's back up. How long does getting approved for Medicaid normally take?
Well, that really depends on the state and the county, unfortunately. It depends, and well, let me back up. And some have a waiting list, and so some states say, you have to wait for 3 years before you can even get the waiver and be in an assisted living. So it depends on the state. The general person is applying for Medicaid, it could take over a year to submit the correct paperwork, to receive the denials and fight back with them,
Wow.
and get Medicaid approved. And with us, it takes about 3 to 6 months. Um, Sometimes we can do that quicker. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. It just depends on the amount of assets that we need to have moved, what it looks like 5 years looking back. So we can generally push that forward a lot quicker. We are on the phone with Medicaid 2 to 3 times a week, so we're kind of the squeaky wheel that gets fixed first. But knowing all the answers and knowing all the rules, we help push the applications through a lot quicker.
Okay, folks, my listening audience. So again, I've been doing this a long time, and then what Jessica and Brooke are talking about, this is a lot. This is complex. You want to do it the right way. Like a lot of things in life, you want to do it the right way. A certified Medicaid planner. If you remember nothing else from this conversation today, remember those three words. You're probably, not guaranteed, but you're probably going to need someone's help, like these two ladies, to make sure that you're doing it properly. And so, how often in that process you have to call back Medicaid? You have to fight because you were told this didn't work or that didn't work. Is that fairly common in a person's application?
Every single application.
Wow.
Yep. Unfortunately, it's very common. About 80% of people who apply for the waiver get denied based on income or assets. Unfortunately, there's some really bad advice out there, like you should just get a divorce and then your spouse would qualify. That's just not necessary, but it is a very, very complicated system. It feels sort of like an impossible task for the seniors that we work with and their grown children who are trying to help them get through this. And so, as certified Medicaid planners, we can go through their situation and identify a targeted eligibility date where we can rely on Medicaid kicking in, and we can, have a formalized plan of, well, we're going to privately pay for 3 months here, and then Medicaid will be approved and it will be covered from then on. So,
Very interesting. I have another question. Let's talk about the estate and recovery and preserving the home. Can one of you guys address that?
Absolutely. So, Medicaid has obviously what's called a state recovery, and they will attempt to, after the client passes or the applicant passes away, they will attempt to recoup any amount of money that they've paid out. So, if there's a home in the client's name, Medicaid could possibly place a lien on the home for the amount of that they paid for the applicant's care. And things such as the Miller Trust, they can come back and attach to. They're going to try to get payment back as much as they can, if they can. So we work through with the families. There are 5 ways that Medicaid will allow the deeding of the home. So we try to see if one of those ways is appropriate. and deed the home out of the applicant's name so there's no property there for estate recovery. We guide them through the entire process. So it's not just the Medicaid application, it's helping them pay less money back to Medicaid in the end.
Wow. Very interesting. So again, folks, I really harp on people at a younger age, 35, 40 years of age, you're starting to make money, not only for your older loved ones, but yourself. You really want to think about this little tiny word called care and saving for that, in addition to what has been the word through ever, it seems like, retirement. Ladies, I'm going to say something. If you disagree with me, please tell me. But everything I'm hearing, it seems like looking to Medicaid to be able to pay these care bills for mom or dad, etc. I wouldn't think that would be your first choice. That may be something that you're falling into if nothing else works. Am I right? Am I wrong? Please tell me.
Yeah, I think definitely nobody's excited to be on Medicaid. However, like we discussed earlier, about 80-90% of seniors are not making enough monthly income to provide the care they need. So they really are kind of backed into this situation of I have to have this care, or even sometimes they're stuck in the hospital before, they've got to find some place to go because they can't go home. It's not a safe plan, and so they have to have these waivers in place, unless you have the money saved up and the monthly income coming in, or family to help pitch in. It is solely this Medicaid waiver that will pay for care.
Very interesting. As we get close to wrapping up, I want to get real and make sure people really understand. So let's talk about three locations: skilled nursing, let's talk about assisted living, and let's talk about care in the home. If someone is in skilled nursing, is Medicaid normally going to, and they're on Medicaid, is Medicaid normally going to pick up that bill?
Yes.
Yeah.
So 70% of the seniors in a skilled nursing, again, that 70%, are on Medicaid. And actually, I believe that number is probably higher. So skilled nursing is the one that costs, $9,000 to $10,000 a month. And that's just, in the smaller areas. Again, in the bigger areas, it can go up to $15,000 a month. So the majority of the applicants in a skilled nursing are on Medicaid services.
Wow.
But yes, essentially the waiver will pay the bill. What they do is they accept their income, whatever income that is, after we've done, if they're married, the separation of assets and diverted some of their income to their spouse, then that income that's left over would be counted towards their rent at the facility. They get to keep, at a skilled nursing, approximately $40 for personal needs spending, and the rest of their income would go as payment, and then they turn around and bill Medicaid for the remaining.
Very interesting. So again, let's talk reality here in the Treasure Valley area. How many assisted livings are going to accept Medicaid as their full payment?
That's a great question. It's becoming more and more difficult to find assisted livings that will accept Medicaid. Um, there are a handful of facilities that will accept straight Medicaid, meaning that they don't come in with any private pay funds in the beginning. Um, However, most facilities will expect or require some private pay funds initially and then rolling to Medicaid. So they really want you to spend all of your money down at the facility first and then roll to Medicaid.
Very interesting. Now let's talk about care in the home. You have a professional coming in from a home care agency. Same type of question. How many agencies throughout this area are going to accept Medicaid as the full payment?
Very little. That's the problem that we're having with in-home caregivers or anyone that accepts Medicaid. Unfortunately, Medicaid doesn't reimburse as much as they should or could. And so the pay for those Medicaid caregivers is incredibly low. We always joke, but it's not a joke, that you could work at McDonald's for $15 an hour, or
Wow.
you can help somebody bathe and shower for $10 an hour.
Wow.
And so, what are you going to choose? And so it's almost impossible unless you know somebody who's going to be able to provide that care for you as what's called a built-in caregiver and receive the benefit that or the income that Medicaid will pay. It's almost impossible to find those caregivers.
Wow. So folks, we're almost 28 minutes into this conversation. I'm going to bring up that four-letter word that I know you guys hate called plan. But what I'm hearing, Medicaid's awesome and it's there for the purposes it's there for. But I really want to encourage people, as we talk about all the time, to plan from a financial perspective for care for loved ones, care for yourself. Do we know where things will be in 20 or 30 years from now? No. But as Brooke and Jessica are talking about, it's complicated. Finding locations other than skilled nursing where mom or dad or grandparents can get that care is also challenging. So they brought some great information today. But folks, please remember that word that you hate, plan. Ladies, as we get ready to wrap up, who would like to give us some contact information, whether it's email, whether it's website, whatever it may be, phone number? Go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, you can reach out to us at Legacy Navigation. Our website is legacynavigate.com. Our phone number is 208-204-6004.
Fantastic. And folks, if you want to reach out to me, you have a comment, you have a question, you're a person in the elder care industry, you'd like to talk about being on the podcast, once again, my email, eldered2023@gmail.com. So again, I'd like to thank Brooke and Jessica. And as we get ready to wrap up, folks, as I say on every episode, until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day.